Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason De La Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. The regular season is over. The playoffs are about to begin. There are 8 teams still alive in Texoma. We'll talk about the ones who had their seasons come to an end. We'll talk about the ones who want to keep their seasons going and everything in between. Here on the latest edition of the podcast, Week 12, if you're counting at home, and things are really going to get good because now is what everybody has been waiting for. The seeding is done. We know who's in. Officially, we got our last team in. They were the last team in the entire state to know that they made the playoffs. We'll talk about them. We'll talk about everything. And we'll do it as we always do, thanks to our good friends at Frontier Golf Carts Texoma. Experience the thrill of savings to celebrate their new Denison location, proudly serving the greater Texoma area, where they're launching with the lowest prices of the year. This marks an exciting new chapter in the 11-year history of Frontier Golf Carts as they expand from the original location in Salina. For their grand opening, come see the awesome collection of new carts with up to $1,500 off, including the 2024 Frontier EV Lightning F4 with all seats facing forward. New lithium battery-powered golf carts with backup cameras and touchscreen entertainment start at $7,495. Visit frontiergolfcarts.com or check out their Facebook page for the latest specials. And even though we're in the playoffs, we're probably going to have 5 or 6 more of these to come. If you would like to sponsor the podcast, contact Renee Marler at rmarler@cherryroad.com. Jump on in or plan ahead for next year because we'll be rocking and rolling for the start of the season next August. You can get in on it. Join Frontier Golf Carts Texoma in sponsoring the podcast. Now, we will stick with our format as we always do. We will start at the top. We'll work our way down to the bottom, and we will talk about that team and whatever is going on with them. Hopefully they have a game if you're a fan of a team that's still playing. Unfortunately, we do have some teams whose seasons came to an end last week. And for both of our 5A teams, that was the case. And we will start up top with them, give all the recaps, and then if we have teams that have games, we will preview those matchups, what that all means, who they would play in the next round, all that good stuff. And so we start in 5A, start with the Sherman Bearcats, who ended their season on a positive note, winning 17-10 against Frisco Lebanon Trail. We talked about last week that Sherman has been really good about staying focused, staying in the moment, being able to finish strong. They've done that the last couple of years. They did it again here. They get up 17-0 into the third quarter. Lebanon Trail tries to make a little bit of a comeback, is unable to. Sherman defense played perhaps its best game of the season. 4 turnovers, 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles. Big plays on offense. Micah Hunt, 8 catches for 144 yards and a touchdown. Dracavian Hughes, 9 carries, 51 yards and a touchdown. Caleb Orr, able to return from injury after missing the last couple games, is 11 of 21 passing for 204 yards and the touchdown. Also ran 6 times for 43 yards. Randy Nelson added 3 catches for 43 yards. Colby Ray Short, 1 catch for 22 yards. So a lot of big plays there in the passing game. A lot of a low number of catches with a high return rate. And again, Sherman's able to enter the offseason on that positive note. They finished 3-7, second straight year that they've done that. They go 2-6 in District 5, 5A Division I play, and that's 7th place. And I know that's not what the hope was coming into the season. Again, we've talked about this district. It's a very competitive district. To make the playoffs in this district, you had to win 5 games. McKinney North got in at 5-3, and that was after losing their last game against Frisco. So Frisco ended up as the odd team out there at 4-4. And it's at the top of the district ended up being co-district champions between Lone Star and Reedy at 7-1. Wakeland, of course, We know from having finished their season against against Sherman at 6-2, and it's a big district. It's all these Frisco schools, and they're all pretty good. Even a team like Frisco Heritage that had a 500 record on the season, unable to be in the mix, and they finished just ahead of Sherman at 3-5. And so the big question for Sherman going into the offseason is going to be, how do you replace a lot of these guys on offense, because they were all seniors this year, especially at the skill positions. You have all these receivers that are going to be gone. You have a quarterback who was a senior. You got a glimpse of the future potentially with AJ Carney, the sophomore. JV had a good season, so you may have some pieces there that are waiting their turn, because, like I said, you had at the receiver spots, 4 or 5 of the top guys, when you look at the depth chart, were seniors there. You have a running back, Indra Hughes, who's a senior. Although I think Caden Golston showed a little bit as an option going forward this season in some of his carries, since he's going to be back. Defensively, again, you look at a lot of the names that were seniors, starting with Kane Bone, who's Division I talent at linebacker, also at linebacker Mike Collins. In the secondary, you had Alonzo King, you had Elijah West. So there's going to be holes at each of the levels there, but there were some guys who flashed some things that will be back. You have some guys up front. Abram Ramirez is a guy that's back. Jackie Johnson is a guy that'll be back. Kentrell Neely made an impact as a sophomore, and so there again, it's going to be kind of like you look at the offense. There's some things there. There may be some pieces coming up that you have to build around, but it's definitely not as concrete as it was coming into the season, where you had so many senior guys who had been starting either for 2 years or as juniors to fill in some smaller holes around them. But again, a good finish going into the offseason. Again, the big thing about the offseason in Coach Allman's first year was that they didn't have a spring practice. They were able to get into a normal routine about that this past offseason. So they know going into the offseason what they're going to be doing, where they need to focus on things, and it'll be interesting to see how that's going to shake out. Obviously, it's going to be a tough road in this district, but they weren't from a record standpoint, they weren't that far away, and if you flip a couple of those, those games towards the end can mean something. So Sherman goes out with the win, closing district play with that 17-10 victory against Lebanon Trail. Denison ended their season in District 4, 5A, Division 2. They hosted Melissa, and they ended up coming up short in that one, 28-0. Unfortunately, that was a game where we've seen the Denison defense keep it close through halftime / into the second half, and a similar output in this one. Again, we talked about this was two teams who went into the game knowing that there was no chance for them to make the playoffs. Melissa had been eliminated, and they ended up tied for 4th place, but had lost the tiebreaker with Frisco Emerson at 5-3 in district play. Denison ends up in a tie with Frisco Independence for 6th place. They knew that this was going to be their last game no matter what, and they ended up finishing at 2-8 overall and 2-6 in district play. And like I said, it's only 7-0 at halftime. It's 14-0 in the middle of the third quarter, late into the third quarter, and at the end of the third quarter, Melissa gets an interception return, 88 yards for a touchdown to make it 21-0, and they end up tacking on another touchdown late in the fourth quarter to get to 28-0. The Denison offense had its struggles for the second week in a row. We knew this last stretch of games was going to be very tough because you had Lovejoy, who ended up tying for the district title with Walnut Grove, and Anna, which ended up finishing third. So you went Anna, Lovejoy, and Melissa to finish. And in those 3 games, Denison ends up scoring a total of 20 points. In this one, barely got over 100 yards, only had 6 first downs, and not the effort or the outcome that you would have wanted to see for the last game of the season. Obviously, the last home game for a big senior group. And the thing with Denison is going to be, can they find a way to get to the last 3 games and have them be meaningful off of what we saw this year? Obviously, if they had won the Independence game, a game they lost by 2 points, that would have had them potentially going into that final stretch with some things to play for. They were unable to win that early, and then we saw that Walnut Grove was obviously better than what a lot of people thought. Emerson obviously still good enough to be a playoff team, and so they need to find a way to get into that mix. Now they're in a situation where they have a lot of young guys at some spots that flashed throughout the season. A guy like on the offensive side, Brandon Douglas at receiver, had a really good year there. 44 catches, a little over 600 yards. One of the top 15 or 20 best seasons by a Yellow Jacket receiver. He's doing that as a sophomore. Shannon Love at corner, another sophomore who jumped right in and came up with some big plays, was able to hold his own against some guys a couple years older than him, going to the next level, potentially the D1 level, depending on the team they were playing. And that's just at the sophomore class. Obviously, the big thing for Denison, unfortunately, is injury related. We saw that this year. The injuries really hurt them on both sides of the ball, essentially before the season started, because there were guys that were late in getting on the field. A guy like Trace Olson, who was a defensive newcomer of the year last year, he had to. It took him a while to get back on the field, but when he did, you noticed him, whether it was on defense, whether it was on special teams. Got a little time on offense, did some things there. So that's a big key piece that you want to say. If we have him from day one, that's going to help things. And then at the quarterback position, Ty Rhodes is graduating, and you thought you had a guy that was you were probably going to see a little bit of potentially this year in another sophomore, but unfortunately for like I said, just the way it seemed like this season was going, that you were not able to get everybody on the same page, and Gavin Mandrell's season ended, literally within 5 minutes of the Battle of the Axe, on special teams covering a punt, blew out his knee, and there was a chance we would see him at quarterback, at the very least see him on defense, which is where he was playing before, on the possession before he got hurt. He could have done some stuff at receiver, depending on how the season was going to go. There, a really good athlete that you're going to have to wait and see what his recovery time is going to be, from a major injury. And so that may, that's probably the big question mark. Does he miss some time in the spring, trying to rehab from that? Obviously, basketball season is going to be out for him, and I would imagine, like I said, it may be until after the school year ends that he's able to get back into it, maybe do some stuff in 7-on-7. But I think that's the big thing there. It's a group where you have guys coming back in where they fit piece-wise. A Darion Vaughn at receiver. Thomas Rendon was moved to running back this year. Does he move back to receiver? Again, you have some guys at the younger levels, had some success, and are they going to be able to step in like Douglas and Love did. And defensively, you have, like I said, some holes to fill, some guys that were in and out of the lineup this year because of injuries. A Roman Henderson, a guy who was versatile, moved all around. Caden Sanders, who missed the first part of the season and came back. And they do have some pieces there. Jason Cannon on the defensive line. Chandler Lopez is a guy that jumped in and like I said, he was one of those guys that was able to flash as a younger player, first time on the varsity. And the question is going to be, can they take the next step forward? And in this district, again, a really good team didn't make the playoffs. A team that everybody had either as a top 10 or a top 5-ish team in 5A Division 2 that was, supposed to compete for a district title, was supposed to make a deep run. They didn't even get in. They finished at 6-4. And again, Denison was playing with them 7-0 at halftime, 14-0 deep into the third quarter before they were able to win 28-0. So that's how deep this district is, and Denison's got to find a way to move into the top 4, and it's gonna be really tough, just because of who's in this district. Now, obviously, all those teams are gonna lose some people. Maybe not Walnut Grove because they have a lot of young guys. But I think that's the path forward for Denison, is if the young guys continue to take the steps forward, if the injury situation is not as bad as it seemed to be, especially the first 5 or 6 weeks this year. If you get rid of that injury bug, maybe there's a couple more wins there, and it may not be all in district. But we'll see. So unfortunately, Denison ends their season like I said, at 2-8 overall, with that 28-0 loss to Melissa to end District 4-5A Division 2 play. Now we get our first team that has a playoff game this week at the 4A level, and that's the Van Alstyne Panthers. They ended District 5-4A Division 2 with another thrilling win, 35-31 against Cattle Mills. And we talked about how crazy this district was going into the last game. You had 4 teams tied for second place, and everybody was trying to see what was going to happen to get in or out. Van Alstyne, we said, was in. They knew they were the top seed. The only thing that they were looking to do was finish off a perfect district record, and they did that. So they are 7-3 overall and 6-0 in district play. Cattle Mills got in despite losing, dropping them to 6-4 overall, 3-3 in district play. They won the tiebreaker over Sanger for fourth place. Farmersville beat Sanger, and so like I said, the winner of that was going to be in. The loser had to wait and see, and then Crum beat Bonham, which was expected. So those two tied for second place at 4-2, and Crum got the second seed with the tiebreaker in the head-to-head over Farmersville, which is the 3 seed. And again, Cattle Mills got in with the 4 seed, and they almost got in on their own. They were ahead. They score in the fourth quarter to take the lead, but with a little over a minute left, Brady Carson scores on a 3-yard run, which was more of a take a step and leap into the end zone over the pile, and that ends up being the game winner. Van Alstyne was up 28-16 at halftime. Like I said, Cattle Mills comes all the way back, takes the lead. They're that close to earning the playoff spot themselves, but Carson comes through again for Van Alstyne. We look at this district play, and they've had to go to overtime. They've had to go to overtime twice. They've had to win in the final minute. They could easily be 3-3, and they might have missed the playoffs. But this group has found a way to get the job done when it matters the most, and that got them the top seed in this game against Cattle Mills. Brady Carson, again, 29 carries, 151 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also returned a kickoff, 88 yards for a score, so 3 touchdowns total for him. Not as good a day passing, 8 of 22 for 87 yards. did have a touchdown, also had an interception. The touchdown pass was to Braden Miller, who had 2 catches for 26 yards. Tim Moore had a catch for 28 yards. And Rhett Smith had 4 for 21. And Jackson Skinner got a big, essentially a game-turning interception, even though it was in the first quarter because it was an 85-yarder. Cattle Mills was driving. They had taken a 9-0 lead before the kickoff return by Carson, so they're still up 9-7 because they had a botched snap on the extra point. But they were still in the lead, and then they're driving to go down, and Skinner returns that. So instead of leading after the first quarter by any score, they're down 14-9. And the 2 plays they gave up were an 88-yard kickoff return and an 85-yard interception return. So that's what happened in that game. To, again, like I said, it didn't mean a whole lot for Van Alstyne except to potentially give them the undefeated district record and to send them into the playoffs. On a positive note, you never know how a team's going to react when they enter off a loss. Luckily, that didn't happen. And again, as the top seed, they have a 4A Division II Region 2 bi-district game against Ferris. This is at 7 p.m. on Friday at Clark Stadium in Plano. And again, we said Van Alstyne 7-3. Ferris comes in at 4-6, and they won a thriller going into the playoffs, 42-40 against Wills Point. And I'm almost positive that was a game that they had to win to get into the playoffs. And I believe it was actually one of those scenarios like Farmersville Sanger was, where the loser was out and the winner got in, or at least the winner knew that if they won they were going to be in, based on just on that. Yes, and that was Ferris had to win to get in, and they actually won and tied Wills Point to get the 4th spot. So they're in a good space off of that because they knew they had to win. So that they're basically already in playoff mode because of that. So that's going to be interesting to see how they handle it coming into this matchup. And the winner of this game plays the Athens Van winner in the area round. Van Alstyne has been very good about winning their their playoff opener. They are trying to get to the second round for the 4th straight season. They have not done that in school history. The best they've done is 3 in a row. And the good news, the issue with Van Alstyne the last couple of years is they've gotten into the I'll say deep into the bracket, but past the initial wave of what the bracket offers, and unfortunately for them, that Carthage has been waiting. And obviously, for those of you who are Texas high school football fans, know that Carthage is one of the best teams in the state on a year-to-year basis. Historically, they are one of the best in terms of championships, and they've won one recently. They've gone, they're always in the region final. They're always in the or in the championship game or in the state semifinals. And again, this season for them is no different. They're 9-1, and they're expected to, a lot of people again are picking them to go make another deep run, probably be the best team in the region, all that sort of stuff. Well, because Van Alstyne got the top seed, they're on the other side of the bracket. Now, that doesn't make things necessarily a whole lot easier, because on the other side of the bracket, or on the side of the bracket with Van Alstyne now, is Gilmer, who is another traditionally good East Texas power. But as we've seen the last couple of years with Van Alstyne, if you get the runner-up in the district, which in this case is Crum, if you win your first round game, your second game is against Carthage. And so that was the wall that Van Alstyne was running into, was they would win that first round game, and then boom, right there, the next opponent is Carthage. So the only way Van Alstyne can see Carthage now, and they would gladly take this, would be in the region final, which would be in the state semifinals. State quarterfinals. Now, like I said, the pod on Van Alstyne's side has Sunnyvale in it, who's a very good team. That would probably be the matchup, I think, in the next round would be Sunnyvale and Gilmer. But if you're Van Alstyne, it's the best you could do with Aubrey having moved up to Division I, that you could get to a point where Carthage is not your second opponent. Now, Athens has a very good record in 8-2. Van has a very good record in 7-3. So this is not like you're going to cruise into, the third round if you win your first round game. And not to say that Ferris is not a quality opponent either, but it's definitely different when you have Carthage, especially for would be the third year in a row, and you sit there and just go, how are we supposed to beat this team? So it sets up well in the bracket for Van Alstyne. Again, that's a 4A Division II Region II bi-district game, Friday at 7 o'clock at Clark Stadium in Plano. Dropping down to the 3A level, at the 3A Division I Region II bi-district matchups, we have two of those. Both of the teams advanced, and both of the teams played each other last week. I was able to go to this game. Thankfully, the bad weather that came through did not totally mess with this game. We had Whitesboro at Pottsboro in 6-3A Division I action. A little earlier kickoff, and we had some rain in the first quarter and a little bit after that, but for the most part, it was not as bad as it could have been weather-wise. And the game ended up going in Pottsboro's favor, 56-18. And this was a game that was 35-0. Was 42-0 at halftime. Pottsboro was up 28-0 after the first quarter, and the Cardinals just came right out. You don't want to say took advantage of an injury situation, but Whitesboro's quarterback, Colt Fagan, on the very first offensive play for Whitesboro, he gets hurt and does not return, and it's a pretty serious leg injury, and he's not going to be available to play in the playoff game, which stinks for them. And then obviously we talked about this matchup that was going to be a seeding game. The winner got the second seed, the loser got the third seed, and Pottsboro was able to get the second seed and finish at 9-1 for the regular season and 5-1 in district play, with the only loss coming to Palmer, who ended up going 6-0. And in this game, not a whole lot of passing, especially early on because of the bad weather. Pottsboro came right out, went right down the field. Every play was a run. And so there's a lot of that from Caden Humphrey, who had 22 carries for 116 yards and 5 touchdown runs. He was also 9 of 10 passing for 183 yards with 2 touchdowns after the weather cleared. There in the second quarter, he was able to get that going. Carson Nix, 11 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. Receiving-wise, Xavier Brady, 4 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. Landon Goodman, 2 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. Garrett Doris, 3 catches for 26 yards. And like we said, Pottsboro was able to get up to the big lead at halftime and cruise from there. Rip Harper took over for Whitesboro, and again, took a little time to settle in, but once he did, they were able to put up some points in the second half. Wyatt Winchester actually opened the second half with a 70-yard kickoff return for a touchdown to get the Bearcats on the board, and then in the fourth quarter, Harper connected with Braden Bomar for a touchdown pass, and then Harper ran in a touchdown at the end from right outside the goal line. He was 10 of 19 passing for 100 yards and 2 interceptions along with that touchdown. Running wise, Levi Waddell 7 carries for 54 yards. Harper had 6 carries for 21 yards, and Bomar ended up with 3 catches for 14 yards and the touchdown. Camden Stevens had a 35-yard touchdown, and Ace Nelson had a 20-yard catch as well. So Whitesboro finishes at 6-4 and 4-2, going into the playoffs as the 3rd seed. So Pottsboro's matchup in their 3A Division I Region 2 bi-district game, they are playing Maypearl, and that is at Thursday, 7 o'clock at Mesquite Memorial Stadium, which is essentially Pottsboro's home away from home. When it comes to the playoffs, especially the early couple rounds, they seem to always find their way down at Mesquite Memorial. And like we said, they are 9-1 with that lone loss coming to Palmer. Maypearl is 6-4. They come into the playoffs also off a victory 44-21 against Groesbeck. And this is one of those matchups where I think, last year Pottsboro had a tough first round opponent. I don't know if Maypearl's on that level, but I wouldn't. It's very hard to tell, without really analyzing, non-district schedules and that sort of thing about, what's a good loss, how tough is a district. The first round is easy to kind of match up and say, how's the overall strength of a district. You have a situation, like I said, we'll talk about with Whitesboro here in a second. I think Whitesboro is a team that could have done well, but you have a late season injury that kind of changes things, and that's going to alter maybe the perception of how a district may look. But you have some districts that sweep the other district, and their 4th place team is stronger than your 4th place team. Looking at Maypearl, they played Mart, who obviously is a traditional power. They played Mart tough in a loss. They've got a loss by 2 points. They've got a loss by 7 points. They've got a loss by 3 points, and they've got a loss by 7 points. So they're 6-4, but all 4 of their losses could easily be wins. And they do have some wins that are close. They have a 14-6 win and 26-22 win, and a 42-34 win. So they've shown they can compete with some people, and I don't think coming from the district that they're in there with Grandview, in there with Mejia, playing a Mart, playing some people in non-district that are traditionally names that people know around the state. They're in a district with West, who was always in the playoffs. I think this is the first time I saw since 2015 that West did not make the playoffs. So again, they may not be a typical 3 seed. They may not be a typical playoff team. I think in that district a lot of the games were close and a lot of the teams beat each other up, and sometimes that's hard to tell. Everybody can be good in that situation. So, but again, Pottsboro has a very good history in the first round. They have not lost a playoff opener since 2018. And again, this is, you don't want to say more or less a traditional Pottsboro season. Getting to 9-1, and the numbers would count playoff games. But Pottsboro's won at least 8 games in 5 of the last 6 seasons, 12 of the last 15. They're always in the playoffs. They're always, like I said, getting past the first round. The winner of this plays the Malakoff-Tatum winner in the area round. Probably going to be Malakoff. A lot of people are projecting that Malakoff is the region winner. Pottsboro does not have a fun history with Malakoff either. But again, that's the luck of the bracket. That's where things sit right now. But again, they've got, I think, a gutsy team in Maypearl that may be, is probably going to be up for the challenge for sure. So I wouldn't think that Pottsboro's going to take them lightly, but that's a pretty decent matchup in the first round. considering Maypearl's overall record. I think that could be an interesting game. But again, Pottsboro's they've had their success in close games. They only have the one loss, and they were ranked pretty highly until that loss. It'd be interesting to see if they had won that game, how high in the rankings would they have gone, being sitting at 10-0. But again, that's where Pottsboro is going into the playoffs. Again, that's a 3A Division 1 Region 2 bi-district game, 7 o'clock at Mesquite Memorial Stadium on Thursday. And Whitesboro gets going against Grandview, who finished second in that district with Maypearl. They're also playing at 7 o'clock on Thursday. They are playing at the Grapevine Colleyville Mustang Panther Stadium. And Whitesboro, again, we said is 6-4. Grandview is 6-4 as well. They are also coming off a loss. They lost 23-16 against Mexia, and that was a key game in that district race because I believe that was for the top seed. Yes, it was. Mexia ended up coming into that game actually behind Grandview. Grandview had to win to go 5-0 in district play and have the top spot to themselves. Mexia had to win to force the co-district champions, but they obviously got the top seed because of the head-to-head tiebreaker. And so I think that's just a really competitive district, and that's a game again. If Colt Fagan had not gotten hurt, I would have said I think Whitesboro has a decent chance to go in there and be competitive, because they had shown over the course of district play and over the back half of their schedule that they were able to compete with some better people. I mean, obviously, we don't know how the Pottsboro game would have turned out because of the injury that literally happened minutes into the game, and that's not fair to judge how that game would have gone. But if you want to look at just their losses, they lost that game to Graham, who has put together a pretty stinking good season. Since then, they're 9-1, and they're looking. They beat Brock a couple weeks ago pretty handily. So Graham's a team that we could be talking about a month from now, making a deep run. They lost to Bells the week before that in a defensive game, 18-6. Bells, who we'll talk about here in a second, making the playoffs in 3A Division 2. And then obviously losing to Palmer and Pottsboro in district. Again, both playoff teams, and the game against Palmer was the toughest competition that Palmer had, 41-33. The offense was kind of rolling at that point, scoring in, they had scored at least 35 points, or excuse me, at least 33 points in all the district games leading into the game against Pottsboro. And I just think that they would have been capable of potentially pulling, a seeded upset, a 3-2, all things considered. Now, the good thing, if there is a silver lining that to the injury, is that one, Rip Harper, who got extended playing time in this game against Pottsboro, has the full focus of I have to be the guy. I'm getting all the snaps, getting ready for this game, as opposed to he has played throughout the season, but it had been his role as the backup, and so he shook. You could tell he kind of was in that mode of I'm doing this for an extended period for the first time against a really good opponent, and once he settled in, you could kind of see him sort of things started to slow down, and he was able to kind of get in the flow of the game, and I think that'll help. But I don't know if that's I would like to see them with a full game of that experience rather than having it be the first game. And obviously Grandview, They may be a little bit down compared to what they have been, but again, the last 10 or so years, they have been a team that has made runs. That's a team that has won state championships. Pottsboro played them. I say a couple years ago now because it's now 5 years, but that's who beat Pottsboro in the state championship game back in 2019. They've met up with Malakoff in some of these games in the region, and so they have that experience on the side. Now Whitesboro, they have some guys that know what it's about to make the playoffs as well, but it's like I said, I don't know if that situation at quarterback is might be too much to overcome. If they were playing a lesser opponent, I might feel a little bit better about it. But again, they've done. If there's one thing about Whitesboro, I will say, in the last 4 or 5 years, they have surprised people when it comes to what you expect out of them in the playoffs. Obviously, the two runs to, I guess specifically the first run to the region final, that they you don't want to say they snuck up on people that first time. They didn't on the second time because they had already been there. But I think last year's team, a lot of people thought, oh, they lost all those guys, big senior class that made back-to-back region finals. Surely they're not going to be able to be as good. Surely they might not even make the playoffs in that district because, again, that's a district that had Brock in it, that had Paradise as a good team in it. And not only did they make the playoffs, they beat Jim Ned in the first round. That people looked at and said, they weren't favored in that one. And then they lost to a good Bushland team. So maybe they're playing up that, hey, nobody thought you guys were going to do anything last time in the first round, and you stunned Jim Ned in a 35-34 victory. Let's go do something like that again. And so that I can see that being the rallying cry for Whitesboro against Grandview in a 3A Division I Region 2 bi-district game Thursday at 7 o'clock. Grapevine, Colleyville, Mustang Panther Stadium, and the winner plays the Jefferson Mineola winner in the area round. Dropping down to 3A Division 2, we'll talk about the teams that had their seasons end last week. The first one of those was the Howe Bulldogs. They lost their final game in 7-3A Division 2 to Blue Ridge, 55-14. And Blue Ridge ended up finishing second in the district like we thought they would. And Howe ends up finishing at 3-7 overall and 1-5 in district play to finish sixth. In this game, Braden Ulmer, 25 carries for 95 yards and a touchdown. Rylan Strong, 5 carries for 24 yards and a touchdown. He was 8 of 21 passing for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Riken Cross had 3 catches for 29 yards. Garen Langford, 3 catches for 49 yards. And this was a game 21-0 after the first quarter. Howe actually scored both of their touchdowns in the second quarter, but they were still down 35-14 at halftime, and Blue Ridge was able to tack on some more touchdowns in the second half. I know a tough season at Howe, obviously the off-season situation where they have a head coaching change because of personal reasons and understandable ones at that. But it has been a step back a little bit for how they're going to have to, again, it's easy to say right now because it's the guy who kind of did it all in a Braden Ulmer. How do you replace guys like that, production like that? I think injuries, again, you don't want to use stuff like that as an excuse, but I think that is a factor at a small school, especially. I think Howe is one of those teams that had to deal with injuries kind of throughout the season. Starting a young quarterback, trying to figure things out along the way. and you hate to say you don't always want to put it on the quarterback spot, but his progression, his ability to lead an offense, Reichen Cross has shown in the receiving game he can be a weapon, and if they can fill in some of the spots around those two guys, can they continue to sort of be in some of these games, be a little bit more consistent offensively, and be more of a threat as the games go on. So unfortunately for how that's their situation, I kind of thought that they could, like I said, be in the mix for that 4th spot. Obviously they were going to have to beat SNS and Calsburg. To have that game against Leonard means something. And again, that game against Leonard, was kind of the turning point for them. They had a chance to potentially force overtime. They lose 28-21, and again, if that game flips, and then they have the game against Calsburg that coming up, knowing that it was for something, and unfortunately not, a late season game where you'd already been eliminated. I wonder how much different things would have been if they had been able to win that game, knowing, hey, if we just beat Leonard, all we have to do is beat Calsburg and SNS to get in. I don't know if that just changes things or what, but obviously that was a key early game that didn't go Howe's way in terms of the district schedule. So we'll see what Howe can do, and then also in that district, SNS had its season come to an end as they lost against Calsburg 49-13. Again, this was a game that we thought, if somebody wanted to stay in the mix, that was going to have to be the winner there. And Calsburg ended up at fifth in the district standings, so they could have been in the mix depending on what they had done against Leonard. And they lost that game 43-29. So they obviously, in hindsight, look back and say, man, we played Leonard pretty well. That kept us out of the playoffs, obviously. SNS finishes at 0-10. It's their second straight 0-10 season, and obviously did not win a district game, 0-6 there. And again, I think maybe a little bit down the stretch, they were a little bit beat up as well. They had some early success like we talked about. They had gotten a little bit better offensively. They were able to play with some people along the way. It may not have been it was better, it was better than the last year's 0-10. I think there was some more competitiveness there in that aspect, but again, you're in a really good district with some really good teams, and things obviously didn't go their way. That they fall behind in this one, 21-0 before getting on the board. Hunter Corville 8 of 13 passing for 117 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Elijah Gentry has the touchdown catch. It was a 69-yarder. That was his lone reception. Adam Mutz, 4 catches for 32 yards. Brighton McNabb returned a fumble for a score. And again, I think, first year under a new head coach, trying to change things, trying to change the culture and the message and all the things when you take over a team that's 0-10. And they're going to have a lot of pieces back. Joe Orr had a big year receiving wise, had some big games. They're going to have some, I don't say a lot of these guys back. There were very few seniors on this group. So you have a core there that you can continue to build around. And I think that's obviously the big thing with this group is you have a lot of, there were a lot of sophomores, there were a lot of freshmen that saw time, especially as the year went on. And if they continue to take a step forward, they're going to have a full off season under this coach, Coach Pike taking over. That we'll see if they can continue to take some steps forward in some areas to try to be a little bit more competitive and find a way just to get a win, a couple wins, show that there's actual tangible progress, because I think that's obviously the biggest thing for a lot of kids is they want to see the tangible progress of, we're definitely better than last year because we've already won a couple games. And there's a team we'll talk about coming up that did that this year that I think, if you can kind of just take that first step and a half, 2 steps, then you're in a good spot. So unfortunately, SNS finishing their season with that 49-13 loss against Callisburg to end 7-3A Division II play. The first game that we'll talk about for the 3A Division II Region 2 bracket in a bi-district game, we'll talk about the Bells Panthers because they didn't play last week, so we have no recap for them. They had the bye, and they have their matchup on Thursday at 7 to open the playoffs at Mesquite's Hanby Stadium. Bells is 6-4, and they are playing Blooming Grove, who is coming off a 41-14 loss against Scurry Rosser, and Blooming Grove is 4-6. And if you hear Bells versus Blooming Grove, where have I heard that before? You heard it here in the playoffs the last couple of years, because this is the third time in 4 years that not only have they met in the playoffs, but they've met in the first round. So no matter how things have worked out seeding-wise, for whatever reason, Bells and Blooming Grove have a recent history, and if you're the Panthers, you are happy to see that because you are 2-0 in this matchup since they met a couple years ago. So in 2022, this was a 42-13 Bells win, and in 2021, it was a 40-12 victory. And obviously the tables are turned a little bit because obviously Bells is the 3rd seed and Blooming Grove is the 2 seed. But I will point out that Blooming Grove is 4-6, but 2 of those wins are by forfeit in district play. So they only have won 2 games on the field. I think they would have won one of those games that they were awarded a forfeit, because I think it was it was a team that was not going to make the playoffs anyway. So, but one of them was a game that they actually lost on the field. So they would only have 3 wins in this case. But these are 2 programs that know each other. They're familiar with each other. A little different, obviously, roster personnel because it's been a couple years, but you have that familiarity. And the biggest question, obviously, is going to be, so Blooming Grove lost to the district champ in that district, Scurry Rosser. Bells didn't play, like we said. So it's always dangerous when you have the bye and you have 2 weeks off at the end of the season going into the playoff game. I think I lean towards this helping Bells. We've talked about it throughout the year. They've had injuries at some key spots, at some inopportune times, especially in district play. Some guys started getting healthy the game prior, the last game that they played. I think having the extra week off, getting some guys that were dinged up recently, lets them get, closer to 100%, but the guys that have been out gave them the 2 weeks where, Bells didn't have a game at the end where they had to play or they had to win. They did that in the matchup with Leonard going into the bye, and so that could in the long run play well. We'll see on Thursday, but I think that's going to be a positive. Now, could it be a negative? Yes, absolutely. There's always the rest versus rust factor. You never know how a team that is off that long, how does it take them a little bit to get going. I feel like that was the case last year because I feel like Bells had the bye going into last year's game. It was against Mildred, and they got off. They pulled that game out, but it was sort of a sloppy start. So you just never know. But Bells has plenty of time to plan. They know what they're getting into with this opponent, and hopefully it helped them get some guys healthier for their 3A Division II Region 2 bi-district matchup against Blooming Grove. Again, that's 7 p.m. on Thursday at Hanby Stadium in Mesquite. So we've got two local teams playing down at the Mesquite stadiums. Pottsboro's over at Memorial, and Bells is going to play at Hanby Stadium. The other game in 3A Division II, of course, involves the Gunner Tigers. They open the playoffs. They open defense of their 3A Division II championship, going for a three-peat against Trinity Leadership. Cedar Hill is the first opponent. This is a 7 o'clock game on Thursday at Roy City. Gunner is 8-2 after winning 63-0 against Leonard last week. And Trinity Leadership Hill won 64-0 against Inspired Vision, and they are 2-8. But that comes with an asterisk because they would have been 9-1 after that game, but before that game got played, it was determined that Trinity Leadership had some ineligible players, so they had to forfeit most of their games. They had to forfeit 7 of the wins. One of their wins is a forfeit. Again, they would have. That's how crazy this district is. They would have beaten that team if they had played them on the field. But it ended up being a double forfeit. So that's where one of their wins comes from. And then obviously they beat this team, Inspired Vision, 64-0 to end the regular season. Now again, you may be saying Gunner Trinity Leadership Cedar Hill. Where have I heard that before? Well, this is the third straight season that these teams have played in the first round. And it's the fourth time, it'll be the fourth time that they've played in that stretch because they were scheduled to play, they played in the regular season in one of those years. The next year, Trinity Leadership canceled because Gunner had won by so many, and that forced Gunner to have to change their non-district schedule. And this is also the team, some people may remember, that not this past season, but in 2022, decided after losing to Gunner in the regular season by a score of 67-6, we're just not going to play you to open the playoffs. We're going to forfeit because we don't want to show up and have that happen again. So Gunner got essentially a bye in the first round because Trinity Leadership had to they forfeited. And then last year, like I said, they took they took out the non-district game, and Gunner had to play a team from San Antonio to make up for that, and then they end up, lo and behold, they end up playing in the playoffs, so they couldn't avoid them again. And oh no, I'm sorry, that was the Walnut Grove game. No, that is right. I'm getting my games confused because so many people cancel on Gunner or in non-district play. But in the playoffs, regardless or irregardless, in the playoffs they had to play in the first round, and Gunner won 75-0 last year. So the 3 previous meetings have been 67-6, a forfeit, and 75-0. Now obviously the team is better because Gunner has obviously won district every year in the stretch, and that if to play Gunner, Trinity Leadership would have to finish 4th. So they were definitely better. I don't know what that means. I don't know who's eligible and who's not. So who knows? Obviously, it's a better opponent than what Gunner would have gotten, I think, under normal circumstances. But obviously, I don't think it's enough to derail what everybody expects to be another really good run. Whether it's to win the whole thing and three-peat, whether it's to make the championship game, go to the region final. A lot of people are picking Gunner to go deep, as they always do. And again, there's good reason for that. Last week being a perfect example, 63-0 against Leonard. They do all of the scoring except for a touchdown in the first half, scoring 4 touchdowns in the first quarter, 4 touchdowns in the second quarter, and holding Leonard to 78 yards of offense, and again, spreading it out like they always do. Preston Tarpley, 7 of 9 passing for 153 yards and 2 touchdowns. Colin Peacock had 2 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown. He also returned an interception, 32 yards for a score. Mitchell Gage's lone catch was a 25-yard touchdown. Easton Overman, 2 catches for 49 yards and a touchdown. Oh no, excuse me, that was he had a touchdown. It was a deep. It wasn't a touchdown. It was short of the goal line. But they finished off that drive. Brock Body, 4 carries for 29 yards and 2 touchdowns. Hayden Farrell had 3 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown. Dylan Tokars didn't get in the end zone in this game, but he had 2 carries for 64 yards. He had 2 catches for 18 yards, and he was 3 of 3 passing for 40 yards. Jake Campides' lone carry was a 21-yard touchdown. The usual effort from Gunner, spreading it around, over 500 yards of offense, and very efficient. 3 quarterbacks combined to go 14 of 17 passing. And since those 2 losses against Salina and Anna, they have been rolling, which is what everybody expected, because that's what you expect from the 2-time defending champions who have a lot of pieces back. And it has been exactly what everybody thought they would look like. They're back healthy for the most part. The guys that were missing early in the season have been able to get healthy, and they're able to contribute now. And again, since those losses, they've won 49-7, 42-6, 69-0, 65-7, 52-21, 49-0, 63-0. And Salina, again, is undefeated. They are the top-ranked team in 4A Division 1, and Anna is a team that made the playoffs, like we said, from Dennis's district. They got the 3rd seed. So again, you lost to a team 2 divisions ahead of you that's 10-0, and you lost to the team that won that level's championship, moved up to 5A, and went 7-3. So again, 2 losses. I don't say nobody's surprised about, but they're obviously not bad losses. Playing that high above your station, and that hasn't made anybody think Gunner's anything other than another in the running for another championship. So the first step in that direction comes against Trinity Leadership Cedar Hill, and that is a game, again, that is 7 o'clock on Thursday, and that game is going to be at Royce City, and the winner of that game is going to play the Wichita Falls City View Clifton winner in the area round. Dropping down to the 2A level, we have 3 teams that made the playoffs there. The best place to start, I think, is Whitewright, because we went into last week. That was the only playoff spot that was still up for grabs for any of our local teams, and it was going to come down to Whitewright and Tom Bean. Tom Bean didn't play last week. They had the bye, so they were stuck waiting to see what would happen with Whitewright, and Whitewright won 28-8 against Trenton. So they got the last spot and avoided the 3-way tie with Trenton and Whitewright and Tom Bean to get the last playoff spot. And again, this was a situation where you had a team that was 2-8 the year before, didn't win a district game, and turns it around. They finished 7-3 in the regular season, get the 4th seed. They're 3-3 in district play, and they are able to keep their rivals out. To touch on Tom Bean, they end up at 6-4. They finish 2-4 in district play, finish 1 game back of the playoffs. And again, we talked about how Tom Bean is 2-4. They could easily be 4-2. They could easily be 5-1. They lost to Tioga, who ended up getting second place. Excuse me, they lost to Wolf City, who ended up getting second place behind Tioga. Wolf City finished 5-1. They lost to them by a point. They lost against Alvord, who got third place at 4-2. They lose to them on a field goal at the end of the game. So that game is tied before that happens. They lose to Whitewright at the end. They have a chance to get the go-ahead touchdown. They lose by 4. So you have 3 games essentially come down to the final possession, series, play, whatever. And Tom Bean could easily have finished 5-1, finished behind Tioga, who that game was not close. But they lost to the 3 teams. They lost to all the teams in front of them, and 3 of those losses were by a combined 8 points. And unfortunately, that's what kept Tom Bean out of the playoffs this year. And again, for them, it's going to be they have some holes to fill. You know, how do you replace a guy like Bobby Rogers? How do you replace some of those upperclassmen who built this thing a little bit? But you have some guys coming back that I think you can build around. They know how close they were, and I think obviously the big question is, are they going to be able to get over the hump? A lot of people are going to lose some key players in this district due to graduation. Maybe Tom and Tommy knows all they have to do is win one more game to make it. They were that close, and again, then the question becomes, how high can you climb in the standings? But again, they're gonna have their opportunities. We saw how close it was this year, and we saw, like I said, with Whitewright, you can go from having the season they had last year to getting into the playoffs, and they're going to face Hamilton in a 2A Division I Region 2 bi-district game, 7 o'clock on Friday. They're playing at Clark Stadium. This is the Clark Stadium in Fort Worth. This is Fort Worth Clark Stadium. So don't go to Plano, because you'll see Van Alstyne there instead and go, why am I watching Van Alstyne? Hamilton is 10-0. They won 35-28 against De Leon. That was also a game where the winner got the first seed and the loser was going to get the second seed. So Whitewright had to wait to see who they were going to play off of that, if they had gotten in. And then they saw it was Hamilton. Then their game got pushed back to Saturday night, late night, 8 o'clock on Saturday. They were literally the last team to clinch a playoff spot, and they did so with that 28-8 win. A little tougher than what I think maybe they thought it was going to be. Give credit to Trenton. They had nothing to play for. They knew even if they got in the 3-way tie, they were going to get left out, and they played their tails off. They had 4 or 5 drives where they went for it on 4th down, were able to convert, running the play clock down, running flex bone out of, pistol flex bone look that, trying to pop some big runs, ball control. They would run 12 plays and take 5 minutes off the clock, 6 minutes off the clock, 8 minutes off the clock. They almost had the ball the entire third quarter. They were down 14-0 at that point, and they had the ball for the first 10 minutes of the third quarter before scoring and making it 14-8. And then, literally within 4 plays, Whitewright would get a couple big quick hitters and they score. And that ended up being the difference in the game. But Trenton played it as well as you could, against a better team, to try and limit Whitewright's ability to do anything. Whitewright only had 22 plays in this game. 2 of them were kneel downs. So before they got the ball back at the end on a 4th down play, as Trenton was trying to keep the game going, they only ran 20 plays. Trenton ran 66, and that was the ball. They had the plan. They tried to do it as perfectly as possible, and Whitewright was able to hit the big plays. Easton Helgren, 6 carries for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns, one of them being a 73-yarder in the fourth quarter to provide some cushion. Gage Walker, 7 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown. He had the lone catch for Whitewright, which was a 75-yard touchdown from Colt Yancey. And Alex Reeves added a 52-yard run on a reverse, and it was those big plays that carried White Wright to the win. And even though Trenton had the ball for a good chunk of this game, they did have 2 turnovers. Noah Savage and Alex Reeves had interceptions in White Wright territory, deep in White Wright territory, when it looks like Trenton might be able to pull something off and get a score or two there. So again, the big thing is White Wright just that turnaround to go from 2 wins to 7 to make the playoffs after the 1-year absence. They're obviously going to be underdogs against a Hamilton team that's a top 10 team in the rankings, has not lost yet. And again, I think it's a situation with what White Wright dealt with this last week against Trenton. They're on the shoe is on the other foot. They're the one that's going to take the chances. They're the one that's going to try to limit Hamilton as much as possible. Maybe you see an onside kick or two. Maybe you see, you're going for it on 4th down when you might not normally do it because you don't have anything to lose in terms of the opponent and how good you're dealing with. Obviously, you would have liked to have been a little higher in the standings, especially after the start that they got off to, but it's a huge step forward from where they were. And, you can look back and say, could they have gotten the 3rd spot? They only lost to Albert by 11 in kind of a low-scoring game. But you're in the playoffs, huge, and that's what matters the most. And so White Wright gets to experience that after the 2-8 season with that turnaround. 7 o'clock on Friday at Fort Worth's Clark Stadium against Hamilton for their 2A Division I Region 2 by-district game. The other game in 2A Division I Region 2 is Tioga taking on Bollinger. They are playing at 7 o'clock on Friday, and they are playing at Boyd. Tioga is coming off an undefeated district run after they beat Nakona 62-0. So they enter the playoffs at 8-2, and Bollinger is 5-5. They won last week in a big comeback to beat Heiko 27-26, and that is an interesting scenario for them because I think they maybe have to be in a situation like that with Tioga where they may get behind early, but they've shown they will come back and make an effort to make that happen. And Tioga has done, what I think a lot of people have expected. They continue to put up the offensive numbers. They've been pretty good defensively. Especially again it's another group that as the season has gone on, they had X number of guys out, and then you get a couple back the next week, and you get a couple back the next week, and so they're starting to again get the full complement of guys. But again, if their offense is going to be this potent, it's going to be really hard to stop them from making another run. Again, this is a group. A lot of guys are back from making the region semifinals last year, which was their best effort since they moved up to the 11-man ranks from 6-man. They were able to go to the 3rd round. I think the expectation is for them to at least get that far this year. I think there are some people that think they're the best team in the region. That they've been picked to potentially win the region, or at the very least play in the region final. They're averaging almost 42 points a game, and like I said, the defense has been really good as well. And I know again, it's a good feeling going into the playoffs off a game like they just had, up 24-0 after the first quarter, 22-0. 3 more touchdowns in the second quarter, so you were up 46-0 at halftime, and you hold an opponent to under 100 yards, and you are continuing to show that your passing attack is going to be diverse. They don't rely on one guy. They continue to spread it around. Every week you look, and it's different guys that are leading the way. Rocky Urich, 28 of 39 passing for 422 yards and 6 touchdowns. And then when you look at the guys who were the beneficiary of those passes, Austin Norwood, 6 catches for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. Johnny Dorpinghouse, 6 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. He also returned a fumble for a touchdown. Greenwood McAden, his only catch was a 47-yard touchdown. Gage Anderson, 3 catches for 17 yards, had a touchdown. Slade Babbitt had 2 catches for 41 yards. Sam Mott had 2 catches for 35 yards. Kyson Kirkland's only catch was a touchdown. He also returned a block punt for a score. And Jackson Hurst had 4 catches. They have 10 guys in this game catch passes, and 7 of them had multiple catches. It's really hard to, I don't want to say game plan for them, because they don't have tendencies. They'll spread it around. I mean, Jake David's a guy who's one of their top receivers, didn't have a catch in this game. So it's one of those deals where they can spread it around on you. And if they're gonna be putting up these points, like they have, especially during district play, like I said, the big thing with them, they had an injury with Urich out, that even though he was out, they still were winning pretty handily. But I said that they are fully healthy. They are expecting to make a deep run. And the winner of this game plays the Dawson Cairns winner in the area round. But again, I think I don't know if they're the best team in the region. They're one of the best teams in the region for sure. And I think, like I said, they're expected to make a run at least to where they're playing after Thanksgiving. That's been the talk since last year ended, getting as far as they did and having all these guys back to make that run again. So Tioga's going to play Bollinger at 7 o'clock on Friday at Boyd in a Class 2A Division I Region 2 bi-district game. Last couple games, I know we're going long, but there's, it's a wrap-up of the regular season, and we got a lot of teams playing in the playoffs. Down in Class 2A Division II Region 2 in a bi-district game, we have the Collinsville Pirates, and they're playing Roscoe. Collinsville ended their season with a nice bounce-back win after their first loss, 48-7 against Santo. So Collinsville sitting at 9-1, obviously the only loss coming against Munster. And Roscoe is coming off a loss 29-13 against Miles. They finished the regular season at 4-5. They obviously had a situation where they did not play that extra game to get to the full 10 games in a season. And I know you're saying, Collinsville Roscoe, where have I heard that before? Well, you heard it last year, because in the playoffs a year ago, not in the first round, but in the second round, Collinsville and Roscoe played, and Collinsville won 50-12. And so we have another rematch of teams that have played each other recently, and you kind of know what you're getting into when it comes to Collinsville and what you've seen this year. And I think their game against Santo was no different. They were able to get to a good lead at halftime, 35-0. Again, sort of spreading things around a little bit. J.J. Jenkins, 20 of 25 passing, 217 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He also had 2 carries for 51 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Cantu, 9 carries, 67 yards and a touchdown. Chase Shepard, 6 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. He also had a touchdown catch. Jackson Spivey, 5 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. Chad Davidson, 2 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown. Riley Patterson, 3 catches for 35 yards and a touchdown. And again, an early, jumping on an opponent early, holding them down. Santo did not have a passing yard. All 164 yards came on the ground. And they had a couple fumbles. It was again another really good performance outside of a long touchdown run late in the third quarter. That was all Santo could really kind of do. Again, they had 164 yards on the ground. 61 of it came on that touchdown run, and it was. I think that's what you wanted to see from Collinsville. Obviously, starting off at 8-0, getting to that big game against Munster. That game was close, like we said, into the second half. Munster's able to pull away to win the district championship. How was Collinsville going to react to their first real set of adversity, knowing that, man, we missed our chance to win the district championship, and they came right out and did a really good job with the big second quarter to kind of put this game away in 8-2A Division II action. So the question obviously is going to be, how is this team going to handle a playoff game? Again, there's a lot of pieces, a lot of guys who were a part of last year, but the quarterback is obviously a new piece. He's done very well up to this point. I don't think it's going to be much different. I would imagine. You have a team with a losing record. I think the biggest thing might be overconfidence and overlooking to the next round. The winner plays the Wellington Petrolia winner. And obviously the big thing, based on the way the bracket fell here, is one, obviously we knew the winner of the Munster-Collinsville game was going to be on one side of the bracket. The loser was going to be on the other side of the bracket. The bigger question was, depending on how that happened, what would that mean in terms of getting Albany? And if you're a Collinsville fan, you know Albany has not just been the best team in the region, they have been the best team in the state the last 2 years, going on to win the championship. Unfortunately, Collinsville got as far as the region final before losing to Albany both times. So in retrospect, losing to Munster may not be as bad of a situation as possible, because Munster ends up on Albany's side of the bracket, and you would have to face them in the region semifinal instead of in the region final. And if you're Collinsville, that means if they do play each other, if they do get to the region semifinals, one, they have to play each other, so one of them is going to knock the other out. So you don't have to deal with that on your side of the bracket. And then they have to turn around and play you the next week if you get that far. Now, Windthorst is on this side of the bracket. I think that's a potential matchup down the road that could be an issue. If that's the region semifinal, I could totally see the region semifinals being Collinsville, Windthorst, and Munster, Albany, and I think at that point that's a heck of a fun Final Four. But if you're Collinsville, Windthorst, that's what you want. You want two of the three best teams on that side of the bracket. They have to face each other, and you're not dealing with them until the region final. And either way for Collinsville, it's going to be tough if you get there. I know we're looking way ahead, but at least you don't have to deal potentially with Albany or earlier than you would have the last couple of years. And again, Munster, if you get the rematch, it's going to be in the region final, and you hung with them pretty good until things slipped away there, especially in the fourth quarter. So that's where Collinsville stands. And again, this is a 2A Division II Region 2 bi-district game against Roscoe, 7 p.m. on Thursday down in Breckenridge. And that is the last team that we have a preview for. Now, I will say we should have had a team or a game preview for Texoma Christian. They had clinched a playoff spot. They were playing for the district championship against Longview Heritage. The winner was going to get the not only the top seed, but also the district championship. The loser got the 2 seed. Texoma Christian ended up losing that game 50-0. A big part of that was literally the first play. Unfortunately, it was a bad week for quarterbacks on the first play for some of our teams, where it was an injury. And unfortunately, when you are talking about the 6-man ranks and you're talking about injuries, if you get some, that it really hurts when guys get hurt, because the depth obviously is not there. And unfortunately, TCS quarterback Nate Reed was injured with a severe ankle sprain on the first play. They were already at 8 players on the roster, and they decided that even though they were going to get the 2nd seed and they were scheduled to play Wichita Christian School, that they did not feel, for the safety of the kids and the fact that they were, an injury away from having nobody on the bench, and a couple of injuries from having to play with only 5. They didn't think that was the way to go, and so Greenville Christian got elevated into the 2nd seed for the district. So I would say heartbreaking, just a tough finish for a team that started 3-0, had destroyed, more or less destroyed the 3 opponents that they played. They beat Fairhill 69-0. Then they beat Greenville Christian 73-34, and that was after opening the season with that 50-2 victory over Rockwell Providence. So I don't know if they would have, how they would have done against Wichita Christian. They were undefeated at 10-0, and so it would have been it would have been and should have been an opportunity for TCS. So unfortunately, a bad situation there with the injuries, that they weren't able to get to play in the playoff game. Obviously, they earned it with their play on the field. They're going to have a lot of these guys back. I know Coach Townsend was really excited about where the 8th grade group was that's coming in, because obviously, you need guys to not just replace the guys that you're losing when you don't have a lot, but to kind of build that depth and to be able to deal with injuries and stuff as the year goes along. Maybe some guys stick it out for a couple weeks and then aren't into it as they thought they were. And then you have 10 kids and now you're down to 8. And then if you have your injuries, you're down to 7 or 6, and it can be really tough with the numbers game at that point. But it was a big step forward from where the program has been. And I think that was ultimately the goal for Coach Townsend and the staff of, we didn't play in 2022 because they didn't have the numbers. They went 3-6 last year, 0-4 in their district, and to go 3-1 and 2-1 in district play and clinch a playoff spot, again, that's positive momentum. It would have been nice to see what they could have done in the playoffs. So unfortunately, TCS is not going to participate in the playoffs. But we've got 8 teams that are, and I think we have a chance to get more than a handful to the next round. So we'll be talking about a lot of good stuff next week, I think. So that's it for the playoff preview. It's always good to have this many teams because that means we're having a lot of success across Grayson County, and that's what you want to see. And so that's it for the playoff preview. Good luck to all our teams out there. Hopefully you have safe travels wherever you're going. Nothing's really close. Everything's at least an hour away. So hopefully the weather's good. Hopefully the traffic's not bad. And I thank you for listening to the podcast. And we will catch you next week when we look back at the playoff openers and who is still kicking here on the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.